Rachel Zegler's return was hyped as a bold reinvention, Hollywood's rising star stepping into the shoes of Eva Perón in one of the most iconic musicals ever written. Evita at the London Palladium was meant to be her redemption story, a chance to prove the critics wrong and remind everyone why she was once called the next big thing. But what was supposed to be a sold-out sensation is now a quiet disaster. Entire rows of seats are still unsold. Prime nights are wide open. And the buzz surrounding the show? It's not about the music. It's about the chaos happening behind the scenes. Reports are leaking, insiders are talking, and the whispers are brutal. Missed rehearsals, cast tension, and a director who may be reconsidering everything. So what went wrong? Why are audiences turning their backs on one of the biggest theatrical events of the year? And is Rachel Zegler's time in London becoming her biggest professional failure yet? Let's dig into the drama, because this story is far from over. Eva Perón is not a role for the faint of heart. She's one of the most iconic characters in musical theater history. Passionate, commanding, complex. From her humble beginnings to her rise as Argentina's most powerful woman, Evita demands a lead actress with real presence, control, and emotional weight. That's why when Rachel Zegler was announced as the star of Jamie Lloyd's radical new revival at the London Palladium, the theater world didn't just blink, it reeled. This was supposed to be Rachel's redemption arc, a way to step out of the glare of Hollywood headlines and into the artistic credibility of live theater. Jamie Lloyd, known for gritty and inventive reinterpretations of classics, seemed like the perfect partner. And on paper, it all made sense. A stripped-down, emotionally raw Evita with a rising star at the center, ready to reinvent herself. But almost instantly, the questions began. Not about the production's vision, but about Rachel. Was she ready for a role of this magnitude? Did she have the vocal maturity, the stage discipline, the charisma to carry a show as demanding as Evita? For many in the theater world, the announcement felt less like a bold casting decision and more like a gamble. A risky move by a director known for taking risks. This time, maybe one too far. From the very beginning, Zegler's involvement sparked more discussion than the show itself. And behind all the anticipation was a single unspoken question. Could she actually pull this off? The London Palladium is not just another theater, it's sacred ground. It's hosted royalty, legends, and the biggest productions in West End history. For a revival of Evita, one of the most celebrated musicals of all time, it should have been a guaranteed blockbuster. A sold-out run, standing ovations, excitement that spread through the city like wildfire. But that's not what happened. Instead, ticket sales began to lag, then stall, and then plummet. Entire rows remained untouched. Prime weekend showings were wide open, even just weeks before opening night. Premium box seats, usually snapped up early by wealthy theatergoers, sat in silence on the booking site, unsold and unwanted. The early buzz around the show turned cold, fast. At first, producers brushed it off. A slow start, they said. Summer tourism would bring crowds, but internally, they knew something was wrong. Advanced sales are the lifeblood of West End theater, and Evita, with a renowned director and one of the most recognizable titles in musical history, should have been printing money. The blame, according to multiple industry insiders, fell squarely on the casting. Rachel Zegler may have brought star power, but it came with baggage. Her name sparked debate, not excitement. Theater blogs dubbed it the Zegler effect, not a boost in attention, but a drag on demand. Audiences weren't saying, "I have to see this." They were saying, "Why did they cast her?" And quietly, behind the scenes, panic began to set in. Promo codes were rushed out. Early bird discounts were quietly offered. Marketing pivoted to highlight the creative vision, the director, the ensemble, anything to shift focus away from the controversy brewing around the lead. But the numbers didn't lie. London was turning its back on Evita, not because of the music, not because of the staging, but because the face on the poster wasn't pulling people in. It was pushing them away. If ticket sales were the first red flag, what happened during rehearsals was a full-blown alarm. As the cast gathered to bring Jamie Lloyd's vision of Evita to life, insiders say the atmosphere quickly shifted from creative to combative. What should have been a collaborative and high-energy process reportedly turned into a tense, unpredictable environment. And at the center of it all was Rachel Zegler. Multiple sources from inside the production describe a pattern: frequent lateness, dismissive behavior toward direction, and constant tension between Zegler and the creative team. One cast member allegedly commented that working with her felt like tiptoeing through a minefield. Rehearsals, already under intense pressure due to the show's high expectations, were repeatedly derailed by disagreements, not about performance or blocking, but about authority. Director Jamie Lloyd, known for his exacting but visionary style, found himself clashing with his lead actress. Rachel, according to several reports, often pushed back on creative decisions. Not in private, but in front of the entire cast. Arguments over staging, tone, and delivery sometimes escalated to the point where Zegler would walk off stage, halting progress for the day. What was supposed to be a room filled with exploration and trust had become what one insider called a battlefield. The tensions didn't stay between Rachel and the director. Fellow performers reportedly began voicing concerns of their own. Some claim that she monopolized stage time during group scenes, went off script during line readings, and refused to harmonize during musical numbers, unless the spotlight was directly on her. Others allege she'd correct or override fellow actors mid-rehearsal, behavior that's not just frowned upon in the theater world, but practically unheard of at the professional level. Things reached a breaking point when Lloyd, frustrated by the delays and friction, allegedly called an unscheduled meeting with producers and legal representatives. Behind closed doors, they discussed the possibility of replacing Rachel. Her contract was said to be under review, and, in an almost unprecedented move, producers quietly began considering alternates. To make matters worse, that information began leaking, and once it did, the story shifted from quiet concern to public spectacle. Now, it wasn't just about empty seats. It was about whether Evita would even make it to opening night with its original star intact. For director Jamie Lloyd, Evita was never just another job. It was a personal, high-stakes creative mission. Known for reimagining theater classics with raw emotion and stripped-down intensity, Lloyd had built his reputation on transforming familiar stories into urgent, modern masterpieces. When he signed on to direct Evita at the London Palladium, many believed it would be his defining project. A bold reinterpretation of a beloved musical with global visibility. And at first, casting Rachel Zegler made sense. She brought name recognition, youth, and the kind of cross-generational appeal that could bridge the gap between hardcore theater fans and new audiences. Lloyd reportedly believed she had the fire to portray Eva Perón not just as a historical icon, but as a complicated, driven, and emotionally volatile woman, exactly the kind of character he loved to deconstruct on stage. But what began as a creative gamble quickly spiraled into a professional crisis. Sources close to the production say Lloyd was initially patient, even protective of Zegler during the early rehearsals. He defended her casting publicly, praised her instincts, and gave her space to interpret the role in her own way. But as tensions mounted and rehearsals began to fall apart, his support reportedly turned into deep frustration. Private conversations, with crew members hinted at regret. The collaboration he envisioned had become a constant power struggle. Even more troubling, the rest of the company began to suffer. Morale dipped. The rehearsal room, once expected to be a space for risk-taking and emotional discovery, became a place of caution and discomfort. The creative process was no longer flowing, it was stalling. And Lloyd, caught between loyalty to his lead and responsibility to his cast and crew, found himself backed into a corner. By the time legal teams were consulted and contingency casting options were brought up, it was clear Lloyd was facing more than a rough rehearsal schedule. He was now managing a reputational risk. If the show opened with Zegler and flopped, the blame would land on him. If he replaced her, he'd face public backlash and potential legal complications. Either way, the spotlight had shifted, not onto Evita as a production, but onto Jamie Lloyd's decision-making as a director. Insiders say he's remained publicly silent on the matter, even as internal pressure grows by the day. But in the theater world, silence speaks volumes, and Lloyd's silence may be masking one of the most difficult decisions of his career. Evita has always been more than just a musical. It's a cultural cornerstone, a sweeping political epic wrapped in raw emotion, unforgettable music, and one of the most iconic female roles ever written. Every revival of Evita brings with it enormous expectations, both artistically and commercially. And for Jamie Lloyd's version, those expectations were sky high. He promised a bold new take, stripped-down sets, emotionally vulnerable performances, and a modern lens on Eva Perón's controversial rise to power. Theater fans were intrigued. Critics were ready. The stage was set for something electric, but Rachel Zegler's involvement changed the energy almost immediately. What should have been a conversation about creative choices, about Lloyd's vision or the show's contemporary angle, instead became a lightning rod for controversy. The narrative shifted. Suddenly, the focus wasn't on Evita the musical, but Evita, the drama-filled production starring a polarizing actress. And that shift wasn't just superficial. It affected everything. The marketing had to pivot. Trailers and teasers began spotlighting ensemble moments and abstract visuals, rather than focusing too much on Rachel's performance. Promotional interviews became delicate balancing acts, with cast and crew praising the show while carefully avoiding questions about rehearsal tensions. Even fan forums that usually buzz with excitement about character arcs and stagecraft were flooded with debates over Zegler's casting, her offstage reputation, and whether she had any business playing Eva at all. In trying to modernize Evita, the production accidentally lost its center. Instead of a unified artistic message, audiences were receiving a mixed signal, a progressive reimagining paired with a lead actress known more for off-screen controversy than onstage gravitas. For theater traditionalists, it was an affront. For younger audiences, it wasn't compelling enough to buy a ticket. The result? A show suffering from a full-blown identity crisis. Was this still about Eva Perón's story, or had it become about damage control? Was the spotlight meant to illuminate a legendary historical figure, or to soften the headlines surrounding its star? The unfortunate truth is, no matter how strong the supporting cast, how innovative the staging, or how moving the score, Evita is only as powerful as its leading lady. And right now, the spotlight is less about performance and more about survival. In an industry built on perception, Rachel Zegler has become one of the most divisive figures of her generation. To some in Hollywood, she's a fearless talent, outspoken, unafraid to challenge norms, and capable of anchoring blockbuster films and stage productions alike. To others, especially vocal segments of the public, she represents something else entirely, a performer whose opportunities seem to grow in direct proportion to her controversies. That disconnect has only grown wider during Evita. While Jamie Lloyd and certain media outlets defended her casting as bold and progressive, much of the theater-going public didn't see it that way. Social media lit up with skepticism. Longtime fans of the musical voiced frustration, accusing the production of prioritizing headlines over artistic integrity. Many pointed out that seasoned stage actresses with years of musical theater experience were passed over in favor of a name that would grab press attention, for better or worse. At the same time, Rachel's online presence began shifting noticeably. Gone were the confident, carefree posts of a rising star. In their place were long-winded captions, carefully crafted explanations, and reflective essays about what Evita meant to her. She spoke of transformation, of connecting to the soul of Eva Perón, of learning and growing through the process. But to audiences already skeptical of her intentions, the messaging came off less like passion and more like PR. Even her defenders found themselves in a tough spot. Some argued that much of the backlash against Zegler was rooted in unfair double standards, that young, outspoken actresses are often held to stricter standards than their male counterparts. They pointed out that Rachel was doing what artists are supposed to do: take risks, challenge herself, step outside her comfort zone. But then came the reports from inside the production. Late arrivals, walkouts, clashes with cast and crew, alleged insubordination during rehearsals. These weren't just social media narratives. They were real, concrete issues that affected the show's progress. And suddenly, it became harder to blame the controversy on internet trolls or media exaggeration. Critics began to turn. Theater columnists who had once praised the casting as visionary started using words like reckless, undisciplined, and distracting. The conversation wasn't just about whether Rachel Zegler was talented, it became about whether she was reliable, whether she was a true collaborator or a storm the production had to weather. And all the while, the show's opening night crept closer, with audiences still unsure if the star they'd see on stage would be the one they were promised, or someone else entirely. Every major production carries risk, but few are under as much pressure as this one. With Evita just weeks away from opening night, the stakes surrounding Rachel Zegler's performance have skyrocketed. For the audience, for the cast, for the Creative team, and especially for Zegler herself, this isn't just another show, it's a make or break moment. For Rachel, this role was meant to silence critics and showcase the range many believe she's yet to fully prove. And in theory, she has all the ingredients: vocal talent, a cinematic presence, and an industry that clearly believes in her potential. But theory doesn't sell tickets, and it doesn't quiet a room full of skeptical theatergoers expecting greatness from a role as sacred as Eva Perón. That's what makes this moment so volatile. If Zegler steps onto that stage and delivers an unforgettable, emotionally charged performance, it could flip the entire narrative. Critics may spin it as a triumphant comeback. Detractors may soften. She might even redefine her career with one breakthrough night. But that's a big if, because if the reports from rehearsals hold true, if tension spills over, if she forgets lines, falters vocally, or clashes with the ensemble on stage, the fallout could be swift and unforgiving. Theater critics are notoriously sharp when a high-profile revival misses the mark, and audiences, already wary, won't hesitate to share their disappointment online within minutes of curtain call. Then there's the added layer of uncertainty. Will she even be the one performing on opening night? With rumors swirling about, possible replacements and contractual clauses, there's no guarantee. That kind of instability makes ticket buyers nervous, and it creates the kind of pressure few performers, even seasoned ones, could survive without cracking. Jamie Lloyd also finds himself walking a professional tightrope. If the show fails, blame may fall on him for betting too hard on a star, still struggling to earn the public's trust. If he pulls the plug on Zegler too close to the premiere, it could cause chaos, legally, logistically, and publicly. And hovering over all of this is one brutal truth. Evita doesn't forgive mediocrity. Eva Perón is a role that demands emotional precision and complete commitment. Anything less feels hollow, flat. And when the expectations are this high, audiences won't settle for good enough. Every eye will be on that stage come opening night. Not just to see if Rachel Zegler can succeed, but to see if the production survives her. At some point, every production has to ask itself a painful question. When does the offstage drama begin to eclipse the performance itself? For Evita, that question is no longer hypothetical. It's the current reality. What began as a bold, creative venture has morphed into a full-blown narrative. Not about Eva Perón, not about the artistry behind the revival, but about Rachel Zegler's conduct, her impact, and the unraveling trust between her and the people. Trying to build a successful show around her, the public isn't just watching the story unfold, they're consuming it like tabloid theater. Reddit threads, TikToks, and fan forums are now packed with updates from anonymous insiders and leaked rehearsal anecdotes. Each new rumor spreads faster than the last. Some believe that all press is good press, that controversy creates attention, and attention sells tickets. In fact, a few industry analysts have quietly suggested that the storm surrounding Zegler could lead to a burst in last-minute ticket sales, driven by curiosity rather than admiration. But seasoned theater professionals know better. They know there's a difference between buzz and reputation, between viral drama and sustainable success. Because when an audience shows up to see a train wreck, they're not there for the story. They're there for the crash. More importantly, the tension isn't just external anymore. Sources close to the production claim that backstage morale is crumbling. Crew members feel underappreciated. Supporting cast members are reportedly exhausted by the constant shifting energy in the rehearsal room. And even basic scheduling has become difficult as producers try to manage press speculation, legal risk, and last-minute creative adjustments. Meanwhile, the show's identity continues to blur. At one point, Evita was supposed to be a political, emotional, and intimate portrayal of a polarizing historical figure. Now, it's being treated like a live-action controversy, a real-time cautionary tale about fame, ego, and what happens when a production becomes hostage to its own headline. If Rachel stays in the role and stuns on opening night, the story might be salvaged. The media could spin it as a comeback, a she proved them all wrong narrative that breathes new life into the production, but if she doesn't, if even one piece of the puzzle falls out of place, Evita may not be remembered for its reinvention or its direction. It may only be remembered for the drama it couldn't escape. Every theater production comes with pressure, but few face the perfect storm Evita is currently caught in. As opening night draws near, the stakes have escalated from artistic to existential. What was once a celebrated revival with critical buzz and creative promise has become a public test of endurance for the director, the cast, and especially for Rachel Zegler. The financial risk is enormous. A show of this magnitude at the London Palladium doesn't operate on modest margins. It's a multi-million-dollar endeavor with high production costs, aggressive marketing budgets, and contractual obligations that don't allow for much flexibility. When ticket sales underperform, when controversies hit headlines, and when the lead actress becomes a liability instead of an asset, the entire foundation starts to shake, and shake it has. Producers are now stuck in a nightmare scenario. If they replace Zegler, they face emergency casting costs, potential legal battles, and the logistical chaos of reblocking the show and retraining a new lead with just days or weeks to spare. But if they keep her, they risk opening to half-empty houses, icy reviews, and a production defined by baggage rather than brilliance. Even more damaging is the uncertainty surrounding it all. Casual theater goers, the ones who make up a large portion of West End audiences, are hesitant to commit to tickets. No one wants to spend money on a performance if they're not even sure who will be taking the stage. That cloud of doubt has become a silent box office killer. For the rest of the cast, it's demoralizing. They've poured themselves into the project only to watch their efforts drowned out by one name. Crew members and backstage staff are reportedly bracing for last-minute changes or, in the worst-case scenario, a delayed or damaged premiere. Confidence has eroded, focus has fractured, and every new headline chips away at what little stability remains. The crisis isn't just about Zegler anymore. It's about the reputation of everyone involved. Jamie Lloyd, whose career has been built on visionary revivals, now risks being remembered for a miscalculation. Theater investors, typically quiet partners behind the scenes, are said to be growing anxious. Some have even begun hedging their losses privately, assuming the production may not recoup, and all of this before a single curtain has been raised. The fallout from Evita is bigger than just one production. It reflects a deeper divide in the entertainment industry, one that's been quietly building for years. A divide between how talent is chosen and how that talent is received by the public. Rachel Zegler's journey is a textbook example of what some critics are now calling industry insulation. Despite repeated controversies, public backlash, and mounting skepticism from audiences, she continues to land high-profile roles, not because the public is asking for her, but because industry gatekeepers are determined to make her happen. It's less about proven track records and more about perceived potential, less about audience demand and more about buzz. Even if that buzz is negative, to many, it feels like a system refusing to listen. Producers and casting directors often argue that controversy breeds engagement, that names like Zegler draw attention, and attention equals relevance. But Evita shows what happens when that calculation goes wrong. Audiences aren't just disengaged, they're actively avoiding the product. They're not indifferent, they're rejecting it, and the disconnect runs deeper than just one name. Hollywood has long had a habit of ignoring audience sentiment in favor of internal echo chambers. But in the era of social media, those decisions are no longer shielded by red carpets and press junkets. Every casting choice, every creative pivot, every offhand comment gets dissected instantly, publicly, and often unforgivingly. The Evita controversy also raises uncomfortable questions about accountability. When reports of difficult on-set behavior surface, whether true or exaggerated, there's rarely transparency. Statements are carefully worded, reputations are quietly protected, and audiences are left wondering, who's actually in charge here? Who's holding the powerful accountable when the star at the center of the storm keeps walking into bigger and bigger roles? Meanwhile, the artists and creatives who work quietly, professionally, and with proven consistency often find themselves passed over for someone who simply trends more often. Evita was meant to modernize a classic for a new generation. Instead, it may have exposed how out of touch the decision-makers behind the scenes really are. Theater fans weren't against a fresh take on Eva Perón. They were against a casting choice that felt less about artistry and more about shock value. And as the drama unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't just about Rachel Zegler's performance. It was about a system that keeps making the same risky bets and expecting different results. Because sometimes the show doesn't flop because the public is fickle. Sometimes it flops because it ignored what the public was trying to say all along. Rachel Zegler's run in Evita was supposed to be a defining moment, not just for her, but for the entire production. A chance to wipe the slate clean, to pivot from controversy to credibility. To prove that, beyond the headlines and hot takes, she was a serious talent with the chops to carry one of the most demanding roles in musical theater. Instead, it's become one of the most watched implosions in recent entertainment memory. The backlash didn't start with her performance. It started before rehearsals even began. The skepticism, the pushback, the slow ticket sales. They all signaled a public uneasy with how decisions were being made behind the scenes. And when stories of on-set chaos, creative clashes, and legal consultations began to surface, the Evita revival shifted from an artistic event into something else entirely: a cautionary tale. This isn't just about whether Rachel Zegler can act, or sing, or perform. It's about whether a performer, no matter how talented, can overcome the consequences of repeated controversy and backstage disruption. Because at some point, the noise becomes too loud, the spotlight turns cold, and the audience stops giving second chances. But the biggest question isn't just what happens to Evita, it's what happens next to Rachel. If the show flops, does the industry finally hit pause on her meteoric rise? Or do studios, casting directors, and producers continue to double down, betting that attention, even negative, is enough to justify the risk? For Jamie Lloyd, the production team, and the entire cast, this moment is one of reckoning. Their work, their vision, and their reputations are now entangled with a story that may overshadow everything they hope to achieve on that stage. And for audiences, Evita at the London Palladium has become more than a revival. It's become a litmus test for what the entertainment world values more: performance or publicity, professionalism or popularity. So when the curtain finally rises in June 2025, the performance on stage might be powerful, but the real drama is already unfolding in the seats, the reviews, and the conversations this controversy has sparked. Because whether Rachel Zegler triumphs or gets replaced, Evita has already become a landmark moment, not for the reasons anyone intended, but for what it reveals about fame, failure, and the fragile balance between talent and trust in the spotlight. If you've made it this far, we want your take. Should Rachel be given the chance to prove herself on stage, or has her reputation finally caught up with her? Let us know in the comments. Like if this story surprised you, subscribe for more inside stories from the entertainment world. Because what happens off stage is sometimes more dramatic than the show itself.